Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Doc Talk podcast. I'm Dr. Shazma Mathani.
And I'm Dr. Sheila Wijaya-Singha.
And today we are doing a recap of our first season. This has been a great season, so we're excited to kind of do a little recap. But first, as you guys know, Sheila and I are both Edmonton Oilers fans, and we are recording this on the day after the devastating loss last night. Sheila, how are you feeling?
Not great. You know, there's a lot of excitement at our home. We're in Toronto, so we're sort of a group of folks who love the Oilers here, and our kids wear their Oilers jerseys to school. And so we were super pumped that this would be our year because it felt so promising. And even when they're losing, Shaz, as you know, like there's hope there.
There is, if there's anything that I can say about Oilers fans, nobody can convince me that we are not the best fans in the NHL and the most dedicated and the most dedicated and amazing fans. There is you cannot convince an Oilers fan not to believe, because as we know, as Oilers fans, it's always an emotional roller coaster. They come back from 3-0 to win games. And yeah, I think that's what made last night particularly heartbreaking for me. And also just to see the faces of these players that just put their heart and soul into it. There were a lot of big feelings in our house from the kids last night too. So yeah, you know what? Oilers in 2026.
Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go.
Let's keep believing. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I think a lot of people ask sort of how did we meet? How did we start this podcast being in different cities? And so before we get to all our little tidbits that we want to share with all of you about our best takeaways from our first season doing this podcast, we just wanted to share a little bit about how we met and why we're doing this.
Yeah. So for me, the COVID-19 pandemic has been really great to meet people on the internet. So that is actually how Sheila and I initially met. We started following each other on Instagram and started DMing each other and realized that we actually have a lot in common. Not only from
not the Oilers only,
not just else. The Oilers, exactly. And that Sheila is from Edmonton, but a lot in common in terms of causes that we like to advocate for. And then Sheila actually happened to visit Edmonton a few summers ago, and we got to meet in person.
And then we just started chatting. And then we I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, Shaz, and the way that you educate the public and advocate for change. And so it was just so nice to meet in person and then have the opportunity to develop this together and create something that we want to be helpful for all Canadians. And I think we give a really nice perspective of the family medicine, primary care side of prevention, and you're seeing a totally different side of medicine. And together it's this very nice blend.
Yeah. And I've been a big fan of yours as well, Sheila. And it was so even when we had that first coffee and we're chatting in person, we had this random idea of well, we should start a podcast together, between the two of us with, me and Emerge and you in family medicine. We cover such a breadth of knowledge. And initially just started as we should totally do that. And then look at this. Here we are after an entire season of the first of our podcast, of the Doc Talk. So yeah, why don't we do a quick little recap? We had 17 episodes this season. So 14 kind of full-length episodes plus a crossover episode with Melissa Grello and 2 mini episodes, little mini kind of off-schedule update episodes for things that were topical.
Yeah. And I think, before we even get there, I want to give a big thanks to our producer, Drew, who's been our sidekick through this, who's guided us. And so a big thank you to you, Drew, for being here and supporting us through this, because we're new to this. This is something that neither of us have ever thought about doing, and you've guided us so beautifully. So big thank you to start.
Big thank you to Drew.
Huge thanks. So our first episode, Shaz, you take this one because this one I think was your idea up front.
Yes. So our first episode, which was in the fall, was on respiratory viruses. So the way that we're going to do this is that Sheila and I are kind of just going to go back and forth and kind of say what our big take home was from each of the episodes. So for me, our episode on respiratory viruses, the biggest take home for me, Sheila, was when you said that you kind of said this stat about how in the first year that kids are in daycare, because we were talking about how germy kids are and how both of our kids were getting so sick, that the stats
grossly
show
meaning
that
gross.
Gross. Yes, they are. Yes. That in the first year of being in daycare, kids get 8 to 12 illnesses in that first year, which, I mean, you know what? That checks out. So that was the big surprising one for me from that episode.
That's always surprising to my patients too when they hear it. And it gives them some reassurance that they're not alone in experiencing this. So that one took us right into our mini episode of What's the Deal with Walking Pneumonia. And so we encourage you to go back and listen to these things, especially as we come into the fall next year. These are things to like keep in mind to help you through these seasons. So we talked a little bit about walking pneumonia. And what was surprising to me was something that you shared, Chaz, around when you see patients in the emerge that, you can have pneumonia and even have low oxygen levels, but have very minimal symptoms. And that's something that sometimes people expect to feel much worse and have pneumonia, but you can actually, with walking pneumonia in particular, it's something that you can still have with minimal symptoms. It's just that persistent cough and fatigue that you may have. And so important to get checked out.
Absolutely. And, like you said, Sheila, like as, we come up to another fall season coming up here, it would be great for listeners to go back and listen to these episodes because these are likely things that we're going to see in a cyclical way. Our next episode was on perimenopause. So the structure of this episode was pretty cool because Sheila is an expert in this area. And so it was structured as me being like a patient, a fake patient, but like asking questions around perimenopause. So for me, I learned a ton in this episode. It was actually really hard for me to just pick one thing because I was just like soaking it all up. Like, yes, tell me everything. All of these things are resonating and sound so familiar. But the biggest take home for me that I learned that I think just honestly felt very validating was that symptoms of perimenopause can start as early as your 30s. And I think that was not only validating for me, but I hope for a lot of our listeners because we have so many listeners in that age category that, have written into us, have talked to us kind of in person and on our platforms talking about how that they are experiencing symptoms at this young of an age. So that was a big eye opener for me too.
Yeah, for me too, even when I started doing this work, that was a big eye opener. So really interesting work. And so encourage you to go back and listen to that one, especially if you're in your late 30s or 40s and experiencing these things. Is it perimenopause? Mm-hmm. Our third main episode was on colon cancer. So it was colon cancer on the rise. And we certainly are seeing this in our own practices. And what I found most impactful in this one was that early detection increases your survival rate, your 5-year survival rate up to 90%. So that is why we focused on doing this topic, Chaz, because there is an impact when we talk about screening. If you get screened with the at-home kits or a colonoscopy, you have a 90% chance of survival, which is so significant.
Yeah. And, if you listen to that episode and then an episode that's coming up that we're going to talk about on cancer screening, I actually talk about my experience getting a colonoscopy as well for cancer screening. So if you're interested in hearing about that, make sure to tune into those 2 episodes. Our next one was a fun bonus episode. So it was a crossover episode with the Aging Powerfully with Melissa Grello podcast. And it was honestly, I know, so Sheila, you know Melissa quite well. You've known her for quite some time. It was just so fun to be on that episode with her and to talk about all of these different parts of our lives in medicine and how they cross over into the advocacy space with Melissa. And at that time, I hadn't met Melissa in person yet. Like we'd done a couple of podcast episodes. But then I actually did get to like a few months later when we filmed that episode of The Social when we were live in Toronto together, I got to meet her. And it was just it was just such a fun episode to do together with her.
And the next episode that we did was on how to avoid a trip to the emergency room. And this is a part 1 because we had such great feedback on this one. And I learned so much, Chaz, from you because you are the expert in emergency care. And I think the biggest takeaway was it can be scary to hear these things. It certainly always elevates my heart rate when I hear about the common things that you see in the emerge that are preventable. So swimming related deaths or drowning accidents or parking lot related injuries that happen with our kids and our little ones. And that really struck a chord where I think parents especially may be nervous to listen to this one, but I would say this is your essential episode to listen to in our season 1, because you did such a beautiful job of sharing with us the things that you are seeing in the emergency room and the practical things that we can do to prevent those injuries. And certainly something that I shared with many of my parents. I shared it with our WhatsApp parent group and all these different things because I think you just hit so many key factors. And I'm really excited that you are going to be doing a part 2 in season 2 on how to avoid a trip to the emerge and likely a bit more of a focus on adult avoidance because the first one that we did was more on kids.
Yeah. And like you said, Sheila, there were like, when Sheila and I do episodes, we kind of talk about things before we make a script. And there were so many things
Mhm.
on that document that we like just couldn't get through everything. And so we decided kind of on the fly while we were recording the episode, realizing that we weren't going to get through everything, to just like stick with the pediatric ones, because there's an entire episode worth of things for the adult population as well. And so that will be coming in season 2. We are going to do a part 2 on that. Our next episode was one of my, I was just like fangirling the entire time, was an episode on whether we could learn a thing or two from professional sport and medicine. And that was with Dr. Haley Wickenheiser, where we interviewed her and talked about the kind of overlaps between sport and medicine, of which there are many. And I think the biggest take home for me on that one was just the importance of teamwork. We really focus on teamwork, I think we probably take teamwork for granted in medicine, and listening to Haley kind of lay things out about how the dynamics of a team in sport and how many parallels there are with the dynamics of teams in medicine. It was just really nice to see that laid out, and just spelled out in that way. It was a really, really interesting conversation with her.
She's also just so chill and has a calmness, which I think is such a necessary skill, especially as an emergency room doc like yourself, Shaz. So that was really lovely to meet with her. Our following episode after this was a really important one, and one that, I think everyone knows about a little bit, but we dove deep into diabetes. So episode was called Could I Get Diabetes? And what's really important about this is we know 1 in 3 Canadians have diabetes, but the key takeaway for me in this is it's not just about your blood sugar that and why we focus on diabetes care and prevention. It's really the complications of diabetes that we worry about the most. So things like heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, blindness, all of these different things that we don't necessarily associate with diabetes, but are really the reason why we treat diabetes so aggressively in our practices to prevent those long-term complications. So I was really glad that we did this episode, because I think people are like, yeah, that's my blood sugar, it's fine. But there's other implications involved with this. And it was just like a really informative, thorough, but not too long of an episode to catch and really get that information that's important to prevent and treat.
Yep, absolutely. Our next episode had another awesome guest, which is Dr. Sujay Kansagra, who is a sleep doc down in the US that works at Duke University. And oh my goodness, the number of pearls that he had for us in that episode. Like I was like, oh, this is like another episode for me where I was just like trying to absorb everything and learn everything that he could tell us about sleep, especially myself as a shift worker. And so for me, the big takeaway for that was how I consume my caffeine and how I consume my alcohol related and the effects on sleep that has. So things that we, think are helping, like caffeine waking us up, and, this misconception that alcohol can help us sleep, they actually are counterproductive. And so that was among the many take homes, that was the big one that stood out for me on that episode.
That was one of my faves this season, I'd have to say, because I listened to it several times myself, because he was so wonderful and such a great advocate around this. And I think we got teary, actually, Shaz, listening to this one, because he made a statement of good sleep is possible for all of us. And as someone who struggled with that my whole life, I found that really beautiful. So really encourage you, if sleep is an issue, I know many of you do struggle with sleep, please take a listen to this one, because it's really practical, evidence-based, and super helpful. Our next episode was on bone health. So how do I optimize bone health? Now, Shaz, you see folks and they emerge with fractures. I see them in my office. And we really focus on the key takeaway from this one, which I think we don't emphasize enough in our office, is around resistance training and lifting can help prevent bone mineral density loss. And so this may seem challenging to do, but small goals of lifting weights or walking as a weight-bearing exercise, those kinds of things can be really helpful to help with your bone density, not just medication, not just calcium and vitamin D, but actually taking that step with that kind of movement. And I just think that's a really key takeaway from that episode.
It helped me kind of start, it helped remind me that I needed to integrate strength training and not just cardio back into my routine. So that was good for me too. Our next episode was a mini episode on measles. It was called Measles is Back Again. And unfortunately, as we record in June, it is still here and growing. And that kind of coincided with the live episode that we did on The Social when we also talked about measles. So I encourage listeners not only to listen to our mini episode, but to check out the kind of a more in-depth conversation when we were on The Social. And so the big takeaway there that I really want to drive home with our listeners is that 2 doses of the MMR vaccine are the safest and most effective way to prevent measles and the complications of measles. And I will highlight that it is a safe, very, very safe and effective vaccine. And we are already, unfortunately, seeing so many examples of poor outcomes, not only happening in the US, but now in Canada as well.
Yeah. I'm giving out quite a bit of MMR vaccine in the office right now, and it's been really nice to see the uptake. But again, like such an important issue that's sadly still with us right now. Our next episode was about the bladder. Because we don't talk about bladder health enough. And it's something that many people struggle with. So it's called the Why the Bladder Matters. I encourage you to check that out. The key takeaway for me, Shaz, on this one was around, like, again, a key message that we do for many of our episodes is like, you don't have to suffer through pain or suffering at all. Like, there are options available for you. Specifically when it comes to bladder health, we touched upon, bladder infections and incontinence and otherwise. But one thing that you said that was really important was that treating bladder symptoms is life-saving, because you see people get up in the middle of the night with incontinence or recurrent UTIs and fall and break a hip, and that has a high mortality. And so there's like crossover between the episodes of bone health and bladder health there. But, that's really important. So treating appropriately, and especially if you're postmenopausal, we can treat the bladder changes with effective vaginal estrogen treatment, and it helps reduce those recurrent UTIs and is potentially life-saving. And it's such an important episode. Again, a short one, but a really important one to listen to.
Our next episode was on heart. And on heart health. And so this was a very rich episode with a lot of information. We talked not only about heart attacks, but about stroke as well, because those are kind of clumped under the same category of heart disease. It's not just heart attacks that are heart disease. And so for me, we've talked about this throughout multiple episodes, but for me, the big take home here was that we know that women continue to be under-researched when it comes to heart health and other parts of health, and that women in particular, and I see this in the ER, can have very different symptoms when they present with heart attacks. And because it hasn't been studied, we don't know about those symptoms as much as we do with men. And so for me, that really highlighted the importance of leaning in more and really just talking about and highlighting the discrepancy in research participants so that we can advocate for women to be included more in research. So
important. Our next one is somewhat similar because, again, we see certain women's related cancers also being under treated because of the same research gap. But this episode was on how cancer screening can save your life. So we really did a deep dive into the different cancer screening and prevention that we have available to us in terms of the tools that we have available to you. So we specifically touched upon, breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer screening, cervical cancer, and prostate cancer we also touched upon. And these are what's the most important takeaway is that, again, early detection, if we can catch things before they progress too far, or even before you have symptoms, there's a higher chance of cure and better outcomes. And so this one's a really important one that, again, we tend to dismiss sometimes around cancer screening. If I'm feeling well, I don't really need to get tested. That is actually the ideal time to get tested. So please take a listen and you'll see the age ranges that we talked about when you're eligible to be tested. And this is something that, again, please share it with your friends and loved ones, because this is something that could save your life.
Yep. And we did actually touch on just the anxiety around screening as well. And so really, really important episode to listen to. The next one was on menstrual issues. And, the title kind of sums it up really well. It's not just a bad period. And I think for that one, the biggest takeaway that I want our audience to remember is that pain is not normal. And to get help, there are solutions. And there's so, like, in this realm of kind of, quote unquote girl problems, right? Like women's health, it has been so kind of brushed under the rug and dismissed. And what I really want for our listeners is to be able to listen to our episodes, realize what's normal and what's not normal, and be able to advocate for their own health. That is one of the big reasons that we are here, you and I, doing the Doc Talk. And this episode really highlighted that for me.
So much so. And this one the next one really highlighted that for me as well, in the sense we had this amazing guest. This was also one of my favorite. I had so many favorite episodes.
I
Chaz.
know. This one was awesome.
This one was really, really special. It was called Breaking the Cycle of Loneliness with Dr. Jody Carrington, who is a dear friend of yours, Chaz. And it was so lovely that she came on. She is an incredible psychologist and an expert in the field of relationships and loneliness in particular. And I see this in my practice day in and day out, because people are very lonely, especially post-pandemic. This is something that we're seeing, and that fuels into not just mental health issues, but also physical health considerations. And she just was so candid and kind and generous with her time, especially she shared very openly about her own grief that she was experiencing. And I think listening to this, and I listened to it again, it just made me feel less lonely listening to it. And I think that's something that I know many of you also may be feeling in whatever life stage you're in. And so listening to this, she gave some good practical tips. One of the key ones was just like bringing your shoulders down, Chaz. Like both of our shoulders are up to our ears. And she sort of noticed that, and she said that, and it automatically sort of engaged our parasympathetic nervous system and helped us calm a little bit. And so really beautiful episode that was a little bit different than our other ones, because, you know, she's a really special guest that we had on, and it was different, but so critically important to the work that we do and the health of our patients and the public.
Yeah, that was another highlight of this season for me as well. So many awesome conversations between the three of us, and also just like some great take homes from Jody as well. And then our last episode of the season, not including this one, was on PCOS. And so for me, this one was quite eye-opening. I think, you know, as someone who is not an expert in women's health, we in medical school and residency kind of like just learn a very classic presentation of PCOS and don't really talk about anything beyond just having a few symptoms and like the polycystic ovaries on the ultrasound. And so for me, what was really eye-opening and what I learned that it's more than like, so PCOS has effects beyond just the reproductive system. It also has potential impacts on things like heart disease and cancer risks and diabetes complications. And so it was really great to not only dig into that conversation, but to learn so that I can also be more patient-centered in my approach to the patients that I see.
So that wraps our season 1, and it was awesome. Chaz, thank you so much for being a part of this and doing this with me. And us doing this together has been such a joy and has given me a lot of sort of like breaks from my usual day-to-day clinical practice that allows us to reach the public in a way that is so beautiful in this format. And so I just want to express my gratitude to you for being my partner on this, and like us having a bit of fun and chatting, and we're really excited for what's coming in our season 2.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, I want to express my gratitude to you as well, Sheila. This has been such an awesome experience of just being able to like feel like I'm talking with a friend, because I am. I'm just talking with a friend about topics that we feel passionate about, and hopefully our listeners are learning a thing or two in that process as well. Like you and I do a lot of short form content on our social media channels. So it is great to have this different way to get into more like deeper, in-depth and nuanced conversations about so many important health topics. So yes, season 2, we are so excited that we will be coming back for a season 2 in the fall of 2025. We have a few fun guests that are confirmed and lots of other guests that we're like actively trying to recruit as well. 2 guests that we have confirmed that we're so excited about: Dr. Timothy Caulfield, who's going to chat with us about health myths and disinformation. And I'm guessing a lot of you follow this woman as well, Mama Nurse Tina on Instagram. She is an OB nurse and has so much great content about not only women's health, but postpartum and peripartum health as well. And so we're excited that she's agreed to come on the podcast next season as well.
We have a third guest too that just agreed this morning.
Ooh,
Cynthia Loist, who's one of the hosts of The Social. She is a sex and pleasure expert as well. And we want to touch upon, you know, sexual health and how sex and pleasure has impacts on our mental health and our physical health as well. So that will be another upcoming episode for season 2 that I'm super pumped for. Like,
love
it's so exciting that we already have people lined up for doing this who are awesome experts and so fun to listen to. And so we have, you know, We mentioned it earlier that we're going to be doing a How to Stay Out of the Emerge part 2 for adults. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have specific topics that you want to hear about, please do send us a note. And Shaz, I'm going to be seeing you soon in person again.
Yeah, so Sheila is going to be coming to Edmonton this summer in August. So we actually have some collaborations in the works while Sheila's here so we can record things together. One of which was also just confirmed this morning is that we are going to be on Real Talk with Ryan Jesperson, which we've been on before, but this time we get to both be there in studio together. So really looking forward to that and the other kind of fun surprises that we have in store for you guys in August when Sheila comes to visit me here in Edmonton.
So please thank you. And our final big thank you is to you, our listeners. We have had an incredible response from all of you. We get messages, we get a lot of questions. Please keep those coming. We love hearing from you, and we're so grateful for your support through this. This is our first time doing this, and we just want to make this as helpful as possible for you and your loved ones to navigate our complex medical system, to be well and happy and live like very enriching lives.
Yeah, thank you all, and we will see you guys in the fall.